Welcome to the Genealogy Radio Show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop. And this week's show is all about the Book of Lismore and the MacCarthaigh Riabhach or the MacCarthaigh Ray. UCC has been very lucky to get the donation of the Book of Lismore, and this is known as the Book of MacCarthaigh Riabhach, and it's a late 15th century Gaelic manuscript that was created in Kilbrittain, County Cork, for Fínghin Mac Carthaigh, Lord of Carbery, 1478 to 1505. Now, he was born before then, and Fínghin would be a Gaelic version of Florence MacCarthaigh. So this Book of Lismore got its name because of where it ended up in its provenance in bits and pieces, but it has a survival rate of 198 folios, and it contains a mixture of religious and secular texts written entirely in Irish. The main scribe of the manuscript we don't know who he is, and there was another hand who had another 11 folios or leaves, and he was Angus O'Callaghan or Callanan, and he was maybe a member of the well-known family of medical scholars from West Cork. So there were other scribes and other hands who give pieces to this manuscript. And it's, a wonderful representation of poetry, saints' lives, travelogue, because it gives an account of Marco Polo and so on. And it dates linguistically from the medieval period to the 15th century. It is said that O'Clery took parts of it and copied parts of it, and it has been copied. So although this manuscript is now given to UCC and it'll be on show in its original sense, parts of this have been used as such. So the size of it is 37 centimetres by 25 centimetres, and it's missing 42 folios. And the script is the Irish minuscule. So poetry is well represented through the manuscript, and the dominant form is prose, dating linguistically. Content shows a thoughtful organisation. And what was it for, though? Some say it was a celebration of the marriage of Fínghin Mac Carthaigh to the daughter of Thomas Fitzgerald, the 7th Earl. And his story and her story are very interesting as well. So this entwined two dynasts as such, and it's important to realise the legacy of having such a manuscript. Now, the religiously themed literature was facilitated by the Franciscan community at nearby Timoleague, and that would be near enough to Kilbrittain. And between them and the religious works were translated, it contains half of the contents. Secular texts then feature for the manuscript, and they include material related to kingship, some of which centres on Dermot MacCarthaigh, a 6th century king of Ireland, tales such as Cothraim Halacán Cashel, Octartaig MacCain, a Cochreana, and the satires and traditions, and the traditions concerning Fionn McCool as related in the late 12th century, and so on. The Fionn traditions occupy 1/4 of the manuscript. The texts of the Book of Lismore represent religious and secular learning in the Irish language, and they're, indicative of the elite learned classes of the late medieval Ireland. So the combination of native and European tradition, it shows a library of literature and makes a statement about the aristocratic literary tastes in Gaelic Ireland in the late 15th century. Now, after the 15th century, 300 years elapse. It was deposited in 1629 in the nearby Franciscan Timoleague Friary, where the brother Michael O'Clery copied material from it, and that would have been for the Annals of the Four Masters. It is thought to be identical to a book confiscated by the 23-year-old Lewis Boyle at the siege of Kilbrittain in 1642 and sent by him to his father, Richard Boyle, the first Earl of Cork. So interesting that it ends up how it ended up to Lismore Castle in County Waterford, because Richard Boyle had purchased Lismore Castle from Walter Raleigh in 1602. In the 18th century, the castle passed by marriage from the Boyle family to the Cavendishes, the Duke of Devonshire. In 1814, during renovations to the castle and the town of Lismore by the 6th Duke, the manuscript was rediscovered, having been walled up in the castle with the Lismore crozier, which is now in the National Museum of Ireland. So 300 years, this manuscript stays intact as such. And the book was loaned to a Cork scribe and scholar, Donnacha O'Flynn, who named the book Lower Lassa Mora, the Book of Lismore. So it wasn't always called the Book of Lismore. It became known as the Book of Lismore in the 19th century. The book was transcribed, nearly all the manuscript, in 1817 under the sponsorship of Bishop John Murphy. The title of the Book of Lismore, or Lower Lassa Mora, dates from 1817 then. And from this and other transcripts by Michael O'Cleary, many further copies and sections have been made and contributed to the temporary revival of manuscript making in Cork in the first half of the 19th century. The book ended up back in Lismore around 1821 to 22, but 66 leaves remained in Cork and were subsequently sold to the Duke in 1860. Further transcripts were made by Eugene O'Curry and by Michael Ogue's youngest son, Joseph, who was at that time employed by the Royal Irish Academy. In 1907, the book went on public display at the Irish International Exhibition held in the Hubert Park, Dublin, and in 1914 the book was transferred from Lismore to England and kept in Chatsworth House from 1920 to 2020, except for the years 1939 to 1948, when it was removed to safe storage during the Second World War and made available for the creation of a facsimile published in 1950. In 1879, a photographic reproduction of pages from the manuscript appeared for the first time in John Gilbert's facsimile of National Manuscripts of Ireland. A printed photograph facsimile in black and white was made under R.A.S. McAllister and published in 1950. And in 2020, the entire manuscript was digitised by the Irish Script on Screen in advance of the public exhibition of the book at University College Cork. So in 2010, it was done by the Irish Script on Screen. So you will be able to see it and can see it digitised online. The Chatsworth Settlement Trust donated the book to University College Cork, and it is planned that they will display it in the Boole Library. So very interesting that you can see the full digital version with the catalogue of contents on isis.ds.ie, and I'll be putting together a blog on this as well to help people look at it. And that was by Padraig O'Macon. So a good reading list of what can be done, and it's very interesting for genealogy and just a little bit of the provenance of the book and so on. So basically, who is Fínghin Mac Carthaigh? Where is Kilbrittain? Who was his wife? Catherine, so on. And a little bit of provenance about that would be no harm. Kilbrittain means Britain's church, the name of a village, townland and parish in County Cork, and it lies about 5 miles, 8 kilometres southwest of Bandon, near Clonakilty in Kinsale. And it's a wonderful little spot. Kilbrittain Castle is reputed to be one of the oldest inhabitants' castles in Ireland. The castle was thought to date from 1035, where the original fortress may have been built by the O'Mahony clan, known to have been in the hands of the Norman family of the de Courcys and probably extended. Kilbrittain Castle was the principal seat of MacCarthaigh Riabhach, Prince of Carbery, from the early 15th century. The castle was extensively restored and enlarged by the Stawell family in the 18th and 19th century. It was partially burned in the 1920s and restored in 1969. So interesting to see that. The Book of Lismore features in the history of the place, and it was compiled to commemorate the Gaelic prince Fínghin Mac Carthaigh Riabhach of Kilbrittain Castle to Caitilín, daughter of the 7th Earl of Desmond. The medieval manuscripts contains 166 large vellum folios of material, and it contains the information that the learned people of the time would have been expected to know. Later on, in 1817, it became known as the Book of Lismore. McCarthy was the patron of the Friary of Timoleague, and some of the book's pages were copied there. So the Book of Lismore therefore is written in Irish, but not the modern version speaking today. It was written on calfskin, vellum, an expensive material in the 15th century, and it contains a cosmological work, the most extensive accounts of the lives of saints in Irish language medieval manuscript, an Irish translation of the travels of Marco Polo, and one of the greatest compositions of the Fenian cycle. The illustrated capitals were thought to be added in the 19th century. So very interesting to see what was happening there. Now, the wife of Fínghin Mac Carthaigh Riabhach, her father was Thomas Fitzgerald, the 7th Earl of Desmond, and he died in 1567-1568. He was known as the Great Earl, and he was the son of James Fitzgerald, the 6th Earl of Desmond, and Mary de Burgh. He was Lord Deputy of Ireland under the lieutenancy of the Duke of Clarence from 1563 to his death, and in 1464, Fínghin McNamara's wife, Catiline's father, his father-in-law, founded the College of Youghal. His plans to found a university at Drogheda failed due to his judicial assassination. So there was a downfall there of what happened. Thomas was on the wrong side during the War of the Roses, which didn't just occur in over a couple of years, which was a long period of battles as such. And local memory claims that the Battle of Piltown was so violent that the local river ran red with blood. And this was, you're looking at the Ormond-Desmond feuds happening there. So the downfall of him in 1466, Thomas Fitzgerald, the 7th Earl of Desmond, was badly defeated. He was well liked in Ireland for his defence of the Irish against the difficulties of English law, but this caused problems for him because in 1465 every Irish man dwelling in the Pale was to dress and shave like the English and take an English surname, such as the name of a town or the colour black, brown, green, white, or of a trade such as smith, carpenter, thatcher, and forfeit his goods. Another measure forbade ships from fishing in the seas off Ireland because their dues would make Irish people prosperous. Another provided it was lawful to decapitate thieves found robbing or going or coming anywhere unless they had an Englishman in their company. On bringing the head to the mayor of the nearest town, head money was paid. Desmond was the main defender of the Irish against such exactions, and following his assassination in 1468, Edward IV replaced Desmond as Lord Deputy with John Tiptoft, Earl of Worcester, a crown servant notorious for his cruelty and ruthlessness, who was nicknamed the Butcher of England. So it is Thomas's daughter who marries MacCarthaigh Riabhach, and the fact that her father was assassinated is quite significant because his death shocked, slain by the sword of the wicked, and some said he was a martyr. Some accounts claim that Tiptoft also murdered 2 of Desmond's young sons who were attending school in Drogheda. The Munster Geraldines invaded the Pale, and not wishing to see a similar uprising in Leinster, Edward revoked the attainder against both Kildare and Desmond. Although Desmond's heir was allowed to succeed to his father's titles, relations between the crown and the Desmonds were strained for decades. So this happening in the 15th century caused a strain for decades, if not centuries. The precise cause of his downfall, this would have been Caitilín's father, the father of her father. And the Book of Lismore is based on their marriage settlement of her with MacCarthaigh Riabhach. But there were vague rumours that he was involved in a plot. But something even more simple would have been that he insulted Edward IV's wife, Elizabeth of Woodville, and said she was of low birth. And later accounts show that she was the prime mover, having taken offence at some tactless remark of Desmond. So the truth is actually simpler of what's going on here. He was praised as an attractive and versatile and attractive figure. He was handsome, affable, hospitable and learned, a Renaissance magnate with an Irish tinge. So he had married Ellis de Barry, daughter of William Barry, 8th Baron Barry, and Ellen de la Roche. They had issue 7 sons and 2 daughters. So Lady Catherine Fitzgerald married Florence McCarthy Ray, 8th Prince of Carbery, and some of her brothers were the 11th Fitzgerald, Thomas Fitzgerald, the 11th Earl of Desmond, Maurice Fitzgerald, the 9th Earl of Desmond, and James Fitzgerald, the 8th Earl of Desmond. 2 boys are reckoned to have been murdered by John Tiptoft, the 1st Earl of Worcester. John Fitzgerald, 12th Earl of Desmond, you know, they seem to go through a lot of them during the Tudor times. Ellen Fitzgerald married first Thomas Butler of Cahir, and then her second husband was Turlough Mackie Brian Ara of Duhara, Bishop of Killaloe. Garrod Og Fitzgerald of Macalop, whose male descendants became extinct. So very significant to see this type of history going on and what's happening with the family tree as such. And we're working on a big family tree of that. Catherine Fitzgerald is believed to have been born in 1462. So she would be around 15, 16 when her father was executed. And she is a noblewoman of the Geraldine dynasty during the 15th century at the House of Ireland. By her husband, her married name was MacCarthaigh Riabhach, and she became the Princess of Carbery from 1477 to 1506. For her own pleasure, she erected 2 castles, and she was the ancestor of many political people, including Lyndon Baines Johnson, 36th President of the United States, Winston Churchill, 63rd Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Prince Albert of Monaco, Princess Diana, and Prince Charles. So it's really interesting just to see who she is an ancestor of and how that works in genealogy. And it's one of the fascinating aspects of her as such. So Catherine was in one of the Fitzgerald castles. She was eldest of all the daughters and the 3rd child of the 7th Earl of Desmond and his wife, who was a Barry. Her father, Thomas Fitzgerald, was one of the most powerful men in Ireland before his downfall. He was a Viceroy of Ireland in the reign of Edward IV, and he was executed in Drogheda in 1468. Her mother married again to Maurice Moore Fitzgibbon, 6th White Knight. She mothered Sir John Fitzgerald, who became the Fitzgibbon, who held the office of Lord Justice of Ireland. So Catherine is married into a dynast and would have married somebody equal to herself as such. The annals describe her as a charitable and truly hospitable woman. It is also mentioned her liking for castles and military strategy, that a probable fosterage in McCarthy Musgrave household may have favoured. Probably between her 15th and 20th, when she was 20 years old, after obtaining a plausible papal dispensation because her husband's sister was married to her maternal uncle, Catherine became Fínghin Mac Carthaigh Riabhach's wife, who was her maternal uncle by marriage. She had mothered 4 sons and 1 daughter, so they had to get a dispensation to have the marriage. It was a dynastic alliance, and she had 4 sons and 1 daughter: Donal, Donach, Dermot, Cormac, Ellen. And you could see them marrying back into the Barrys again. Her daughter marries James de Barry, Lord of Iban. So by her husband, her married name was MacCarthaigh Riabhach, and she became the Princess of Carbery from 1477 to 1506. And she could bring her own movable property with her to the marriage. So builders of castles, Ben Duff Castle, probably before her marriage to Fínghin, and it passed on to the Carbery ruling family, and it held into ended up into the hands of Quakers as such. So Dún an Ban, a fort near Dunmanway, that was another one. And like her father, she supported Irish literature and music. So the Book of Lismore, just exactly where the influence come from there, it was probably compiled to commemorate the marriage of Fínghin Mac Carthaigh Riabhach to Catherine, daughter of the 7th Earl of Desmond. The book was written in Irish, but no Irish versions of spoken today, so it contains several important texts. And she died aged 54, 1 year after the death of her husband. Her eldest son seized the throne of High Carbery after his uncle's death some time before Catherine was dead. So very interesting history indeed of what's going on there, and the female influence of the Book of Carbery is very interesting as well. It'll be very interesting to put the family tree together on that. So we're delighted to see the Book of Lismore in UCC, and we'll be looking forward to doing the MacCarthaigh Riabhach family tree with the Desmonds and bits and pieces, and telling you about the beginning of Tudor influences on Ireland and so on. So that's all for today. The show will be podcast out on Sunday, and thank you for listening.